Kim Tae-ho walked through the metal corridors of Nexus 7 Station with his head down and shoulders hunched like always. Other cadets moved past him without looking twice because everyone knew he was the worst student at the Galactic Military Academy. His test scores were terrible and his combat simulations always ended in failure. The instructors used him as an example of what not to do, and the other students whispered about why humans were even allowed in the academy at all. The morning alarm rang through the station, and Tai-ho hurried to his first class, which was Tactical Analysis with Commander Vos Canthari. The commander was a tall alien with 6 arms and gray skin that looked like stone. His species called themselves the Hegemony, and they ran most of the galaxy now. Commander Canthari did not like humans very much, and he made sure everyone knew it. Tai-ho slipped into the back of the classroom just as the lesson began. Around him sat cadets from many different worlds. There was Zix, who came from the Vrex homeworld and stood almost 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and natural armor plating. Next to Zix sat Coral 7 Blue, who was a Lumari made of living crystal that could process information faster than any computer. In the corner floated Depthwalker 9 from the aquatic depth species, who wore a water-filled suit and could survive in any environment. All of these aliens were amazing at something. The Vrex were perfect warriors with incredible strength and speed. The Lumari could calculate battle strategies in seconds and never made mistakes. The Depths could fight in space or underwater or anywhere else without special equipment. Then there were the humans who seemed average at everything and great at nothing. Commander Canthari activated the holographic display at the front of the room. It showed a battle simulation with red and blue fleets facing each other in empty space. The commander looked directly at Tai-ho with his 4 yellow eyes and smiled in a way that was not friendly at all. "Cadet Kim will demonstrate proper tactical analysis for us today," Commander Canthari said. "Show us how humans approach strategic thinking." Tai-ho stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room while every other student watched him. He had done this many times before and always gave the wrong answers on purpose. The truth was that Tai-ho could see exactly what needed to happen in the simulation. The blue fleet should split into 3 groups and use the asteroid field to hide while the red fleet overextended itself trying to chase them. Then the blue fleet could attack from behind and win easily. But Tai-ho did not say this. Instead, he pointed to the display and suggested that the blue fleet should attack head-on, with all ships together. This was obviously wrong and would lead to complete defeat. Commander Canthari nodded and looked pleased. "As you can see, the human approach to tactics is simple and direct," the commander said. "This is why humans require guidance from more advanced species. They lack the mental capacity for complex strategic thinking." The other students made small sounds of agreement, while Tai-ho returned to his seat feeling sick inside. He hated pretending to be stupid, but he had good reasons for it. 3 months ago, while working on routine computer maintenance, he had found classified files that he was not supposed to see. The files contained detailed studies of human behavior and combat patterns. The Galactic Hegemony was not just training humans to be soldiers. They were studying how humans think and fight, so they could find ways to control them. The files called human unpredictability the human variable, and described it as a dangerous factor that could disrupt galactic stability. There were reports about human soldiers who had won impossible battles by doing things that made no sense to other species. The Hegemony wanted to understand this so they could either use it or eliminate it completely. After class, Tai-ho walked back to his dormitory, room which he shared with Park Min-ho, another human cadet. Min-ho was different from Tai-ho because he actually was good at something. He understood machines and computers better than almost anyone else at the academy. The instructors praised Min-ho and used him as an example of how humans could be useful if they focused on simple technical work. Min-ho was sitting at his desk working on some kind of engine component when Tai-ho entered the room. He looked up and saw Tai-ho's expression and knew immediately what had happened. "Bad day in tactics class again?" Min-ho asked. "Commander Canthari made me do another demonstration," Tai-ho replied. "I had to pretend to be stupid again while he explained to everyone why humans are inferior." Min-ho put down his tools and looked at his roommate seriously. "You know you do not have to keep doing this right. You could just answer correctly once and show them what you can really do." Tai-ho shook his head. "You do not understand. If they knew what I was really capable of, it would be much worse. Trust me on this." Minho did not push the subject because they had talked about it many times before. He did not know about the classified files, and Taeho could not tell him without putting him in danger, too. Instead, they both focused on their afternoon classes, which were physical combat training and technical skills. Combat training was held in a large gymnasium with different sections for different species. The Vrex section had heavy weights and impact targets. The Lumari section had complex puzzle-solving equipment. The Depths section had underwater tanks and pressure chambers. The Human section had basic exercise equipment that looked primitive compared to everything else. Instructor Bladecut 7 was a Vrex female who stood over the human cadets like a giant metal tree. She watched as they performed simple exercises and shook her massive head in disappointment. "Humans are weak," she announced to the room. "Your bones break easily and your muscles tire quickly. This is why you must rely on teamwork and technology instead of individual strength." Taeho lifted weights that were much lighter than what he could actually handle. He ran at a pace that was slower than his real speed. He scored poorly on reflex tests, even though his reactions were actually quite good. All around him, other human cadets struggled with exercises that should have been easy for them. Some of them really were having trouble, but others were holding back just like him. There was Lee Da-eun, who always scored in the middle of every test. She had long black hair and serious dark eyes, and Taeho thought she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. Da-eun was smart and capable, but she never showed her full abilities either. Sometimes Taeho caught her looking at him during classes, and he wondered if she suspected what he was doing. There was also Choi Woo-jin, who was good with machines like Minho, but not quite as talented. Woo-jin could fix almost any piece of equipment, but he always took longer than necessary and made small mistakes on purpose. He was tall and thin with gentle hands that moved with precision when he thought no one was watching. After combat training, Taeho went to the station's observation deck where he liked to look out at the stars and think. The deck was usually empty, because most cadets spent their free time studying or socializing. Taeho preferred to be alone where he could stop pretending for a while. The view from Nexus 7 was incredible. The station orbited a gas giant with rings made of ice and rock. Beyond that were 3 different star systems visible to the naked eye. Ships came and went, constantly carrying cadets and supplies and messages between the many worlds of the hegemony. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely fake. The Galactic hegemony controlled everything through fear and manipulation. They convinced each species that they needed protection from other species who were dangerous or unpredictable. They created the academy to train soldiers, but also to study potential threats. Humans were considered the biggest threat of all because they could not be easily understood or controlled. As Taeho stood looking out at the stars, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Da-eun approaching with her usual serious expression. She came to stand next to him at the viewing window without saying anything for a long time. "You are not really as bad as you pretend to be," she said finally. Taeho felt his heart start beating faster. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Da-eun replied. "I have been watching you for months. In tactics class, you always give wrong answers, but your first instinct is always right. In combat training, you hold yourself back. In technical classes, you make mistakes that someone with your intelligence would never actually make." Taeho did not know what to say. If Da-eun had figured out his secret, then maybe others had too. Maybe Commander Kanthari already knew and was just waiting for the right moment to expose him. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because I think we are doing the same thing," Da-eun said. "And I think we have the same reasons." Before Taeho could respond, the station's emergency alarm began ringing. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and an automated voice announced that all cadets should report to the main auditorium immediately. Taeho and Da-eun ran through the corridors along with hundreds of other students from dozens of different species. Commander Kanthari was waiting on the auditorium stage along with several other senior officers. His 6 arms were folded and his stone-like face looked grim. When all the cadets had assembled, he activated a holographic display that showed a star map with one system blinking red. "We have received a distress signal from the research vessel Harmony of Purpose," he announced. The next morning came too quickly for Taeho, who had barely slept at all. He kept thinking about the rescue mission and wondering if he should volunteer, even though he knew it would be dangerous. Minho was already awake and packing a small bag. with tools and spare parts because he had decided to put his name forward for the technical support team. "You should come too," Minho said while checking his equipment. "They will need all the help they can get, and you might surprise yourself." Taeho shook his head. "You know I am not good enough for a real mission like this. I would just get in." "The way?" "That is what you always say, but I have been your roommate for 8 months now," Minho replied. "I see how you really move when you think no one is watching. I see how you understand things that other people miss. You are not as hopeless as you pretend to be." Before Taeho could argue, the dormitory announcement system crackled to life. "Commander." Kanthari's voice filled the room, telling all cadets who wanted to volunteer for the rescue mission to report to the main briefing room within 1 hour. Taeho felt his stomach twist into knots as Minho grabbed his bag and headed for the door. "Think about it," Minho said as he left. "This might be your chance to show what you can really do." Taeho spent the next 30 minutes pacing around his empty room and trying to decide what to do. Part of him wanted to stay safe and continue hiding his abilities like he had been doing for months. But another part of him knew that people were in danger, and he might be able to help them if he was brave enough to try. Finally, he made his decision and ran to the briefing room, arriving just as Commander Kanthari was about to close. The volunteer list. The room was packed with cadets from every species, and Taeho had to squeeze through the crowd to reach the front where the commander stood with his 6 arms crossed. "I want to volunteer," Taeho said, trying to keep his voice steady. Commander Kanthari looked down at him with his yellow eyes and made a sound that might have been laughter. "And what exactly do you think you could contribute to a military rescue operation, Cadet Kim?" "Whatever you need, sir," Taeho replied. "I can do general crew, duties or maintenance work or anything else that helps." The commander studied him for a long moment, then made a note on his electronic pad. "Very well. You will be assigned to general support duties. Do not expect to see any real action." Taeho nodded and stepped back into the crowd, feeling both relieved and terrified. He looked around the room and saw that Da-eun had also volunteered, and was speaking with Lieutenant Crystal Song 4, who was the Lumari communications officer. Woo Jin was near the technical equipment table talking with Minho about repair procedures. The selection process took 2 hours, as the instructors interviewed each volunteer and assigned them to different teams based on their supposed abilities. The Vrex cadets were chosen for assault and combat roles. The Lumari were given tactical analysis and strategic planning duties. The Depths were assigned to void operations and emergency response teams. Most of the human volunteers were rejected completely and told to return to regular classes. Of the 20 humans who had volunteered, only 4 were selected. Da-eun was chosen as a communications liaison because she spoke several galactic languages. Minho and Woo Jin were accepted for technical support because the mission would need people who understood human-built systems. Taeho was the last human selected, and only because Commander Kanthari seemed to find it amusing to bring along someone he considered completely useless. The rescue ship was called the Swift Justice, and it was a hegemony cruiser designed for fast military operations. Taeho had never been on a real warship before, and he was impressed by how different it felt from the Academy training vessels. Everything was built for efficiency and combat readiness. The corridors were narrow and lined with weapon storage. Lockers. The crew quarters were small and cramped with barely enough room for a single bunk and storage compartment. Taeho was assigned to share quarters with Minho and 2 Depths cadets named Flow Between Currents and Deep Pressure Rising. The Depths were polite, but kept to themselves, and spent most of their time in the ship's water-filled recreation area. This gave Taeho and Minho privacy to talk about the mission and what they might face when they reached the Void Sector. "Have you ever seen real combat?" Minho asked on their first night aboard the ship. "Only in training simulations," Taeho replied. "But those were always designed for us to lose anyway, so I do not think they count. The Karthak are supposed to be incredibly dangerous," Minho said quietly. "I read the briefing files, and their attack patterns are unlike anything the other galactic species do. They fight with pure aggression and seem to care nothing about casualties or tactical disadvantages." Taeho nodded, but he had been reading the same files and noticed something that Minho had missed. The Karthak attack patterns were not actually random or mindless like the reports claimed. There was a strange kind of logic to them that reminded him of something he could not quite identify. It was like they were testing different approaches and learning from each battle even when they lost. During the day, Taeho was assigned to basic crew duties, which mostly involved cleaning corridors and organizing supply storage areas. It was boring work, but it gave him access to parts of the ship that most cadets never saw. He found himself in the main computer core one afternoon when he was supposed to be checking power coupling connections. The computer core was protected by security systems, but Taeho had learned a few tricks during his maintenance work at the academy. He managed to access some of the mission files and began reading through detailed reports about previous Karthak encounters. What he found made him feel sick to his stomach all over again. The reports contained detailed analysis of human combat behavior during joint operations with hegemony forces. Every time humans had fought alongside other species, their tactics and responses had been carefully recorded and studied. The files showed that humans had actually performed much better in real combat than their training scores suggested. They were creative and adaptable and often found solutions that other species missed. But instead of celebrating these successes, the hegemony seemed concerned about them. There were notes about unpredictable human variables and difficulty integrating human tactics into standard operational doctrine. The files suggested that humans were being deliberately held back and given inferior equipment and training to limit their effectiveness in battle. Even worse, Taeho found references to something called Project Understanding, which involved sharing selected human tactical data with research facilities near the border regions where Karthak attacks were most common. The purpose of the project was not clearly stated, but Taeho got the impression that the hegemony was trying to help someone understand how humans fight and think. He was so absorbed in reading the files that he did not hear footsteps approaching until someone cleared their throat behind him. Taeho spun around, expecting to see a security officer, but instead found Da-eun standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and a knowing expression on her face. "You are not supposed to be accessing classified files," she said. "I was just checking the power couplings like I was ordered to do," Taeho replied, trying to close the computer interface casually. "The power couplings are on the other side of the Yai room," Da-eun pointed out. "And you have been staring at that screen for 20 minutes. I was walking by and saw you through the doorway." Taeho felt his face turn red. "Please do not report me. I know I should not have been reading those files, but I found something important." Da-eun stepped into the room and let the door close behind her. What kind of important? Taeho hesitated for a moment, then decided he had to trust someone. He reopened the files and showed Da-eun what he had discovered about Project Understanding and the way the hegemony had been studying human combat behavior. Da-eun read through the reports with growing alarm, and her face became pale as she realized what they meant. "They have been using us as test subjects," she said quietly. "Every battle we have fought and every training exercise we have completed has been recorded and analyzed." "It gets worse," Taeho said. "Look at this section about data sharing with border research facilities. I think they have been giving information about how we fight to someone else. Maybe even to the Karthak themselves." Da-eun stared at the screen in horror. "But why would they do that? The Karthak are enemies of the hegemony." "Unless they are not really enemies," Taeho suggested. "Or unless the hegemony wants the Karthak to understand human tactics so they can develop countermeasures. Then when the real war comes, humans will be easy to defeat because the enemy will know exactly how we think and fight." They spent the next hour going through more files and finding additional evidence of the hegemony's manipulation. There were reports about human cadets being deliberately given false information during training exercises. There were psychological profiles that focused on identifying and suppressing human creativity and initiative. There were even medical studies about ways to chemically alter human brain function to make them more predictable and controllable. "We have to tell the others," Da-eun said finally. "Who would believe us?" Taeho asked. "And even if they did believe us, what could we do about it?" The docking process took longer than expected because the research vessel's external systems had been damaged in ways that made no sense to the technical teams. Woo Jin and Minho worked together to establish a secure connection while the Swift Justice's crew monitored for any signs of Karthak activity in the surrounding space. Taeho stood with the other rescue team members trying to look calm while his heart raced with anxiety about what they might find aboard the damaged ship. When the airlock finally opened, the first thing that hit them was the smell of fear and desperation. The research vessel's corridors were dimly lit and filled with the sound of people crying and whispering in frightened voices. The rescue team spread out to search for survivors, while Tai-Ho followed Commander Kanthari toward the main laboratory section where most of the crew had supposedly taken shelter. They found the survivors huddled together in the central research bay, surrounded by broken equipment and scattered data storage devices. There were 37 people from various species, including 12 humans, who looked more terrified than anyone else. The team leader was Dr. Ran Subin, a middle-aged human woman with short gray hair and intelligent eyes that kept darting around the room as if she expected something terrible to happen at any moment. Commander Kanthari approached Dr. Ran with his 6 arms spread in what was meant to be a reassuring gesture, but only made him look more intimidating. "Doctor, we received your distress signal and came as quickly as possible. Can you tell us what happened here?" Dr. Ran looked at the commander, then at the other rescue team members, and finally at Tai-Ho. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, then seemed normal, and he got the strange feeling that she was trying to communicate something without speaking. When she finally answered, her voice shook with barely controlled panic. "We were conducting routine biological research on specimens collected from border worlds," she said carefully. "Standard cataloging and analysis work nothing dangerous or unusual. 3 days ago, we detected incoming ships and assumed they were pirates or raiders looking for valuable equipment." She paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "The ships were Karthak vessels, but they did not attack us immediately like the reports said they would. Instead, they surrounded us and began transmitting complex mathematical sequences. Our linguists tried to decode the transmissions, but the patterns were unlike anything in our databases." Commander Kanthari made notes on his electronic pad while listening. "What happened next, Doctor?" "The strangest thing I have ever witnessed," Dr. Ran replied. "The Karthak began broadcasting detailed tactical scenarios involving various galactic species, including humans. They showed us battle simulations and asked us to explain why certain decisions had been made. It was like they were testing our knowledge of combat psychology." Tai-Ho felt ice form in his stomach as he realized what this meant. The Karthak had somehow obtained the same classified information he had discovered in the ship's computer files. They knew about Project Understanding and the hegemony's studies of human tactical behavior. Dr. Ran continued her explanation, while the other survivors listened with haunted expressions. "We told them we were scientists, not military analysts, but they insisted we had information they needed. They began showing us recordings of human soldiers in combat situations and asking us to predict what the humans would do next." "Did you cooperate?" "With them?" Commander Kanthari asked sharply. "We had no choice," Dr. Ran said defensively. "They made it clear they would destroy us if we refused to help. But here is the truly terrifying part. Every time we explained human tactical thinking to them, they adapted their own strategies immediately. They were learning from us in real time." The commander's stone-like face showed confusion and concern. Learning what exactly, Dr. Ran looked directly at Tai-Ho again before answering. "How to counter human unpredictability. They called it solving the human variable. They said they had been given partial data about human combat patterns, but needed complete understanding to achieve final victory over the hegemony." Tai-Ho felt like he was going to be sick. Everything he had feared was true. The hegemony had been feeding human tactical data to the Karthak as part of some larger plan. But what Dr. Ran described suggested the plan had gone horribly wrong. Instead of controlling the situation, the hegemony had created an enemy that could adapt to human tactics faster than anyone had imagined possible. "Doctor, how did the Karthak ships get destroyed?" Commander Kanthari asked. "Our scans show they were damaged by their own weapons." Dr. Rand's expression became even more frightened. "That was the most horrible part of all. After they finished questioning us about human tactics, they began testing their new understanding against each other. Ship fought ship in elaborate mock battles where they practiced countering human-style strategies. But something went wrong with their coordination systems." She gestured toward a damaged computer terminal near the wall. "We think they became so focused on adapting to human unpredictability that they lost the ability to work together effectively. Their fleet coordination broke down, and they started attacking each other by mistake. Within hours, their entire force had destroyed itself through friendly fire and tactical confusion. The rescue team spent the next several hours evacuating the survivors and collecting data from the research vessel's computers. Taeho volunteered to help with data recovery, which gave him access to the ship's main database systems. What he found there confirmed his worst fears and revealed the full scope of the conspiracy he had stumbled upon. The research vessel had not been conducting routine biological studies. Instead, it had been a mobile laboratory designed to test human psychological responses to various combat scenarios. The specimens they had been studying were not alien creatures, but recorded brain scans and behavioral patterns from human soldiers who had participated in recent border conflicts. The files showed that Project Understanding was much larger than Taeho had imagined. The hegemony had been systematically exposing human military units to Karthak attacks in order to record their responses and develop detailed psychological profiles. Then they had been sharing this information with Karthak research facilities through supposedly accidental data breaches and captured equipment. The ultimate goal was to create a situation where the Karthak would become obsessed with countering human tactics and would develop specific strategies designed to defeat human forces. Then when the final war came, the hegemony could use humanity's true capabilities to surprise an enemy that thought it understood how humans fight. But the plan required humans to remain ignorant of their own potential. The Academy's training programs were designed to suppress human creativity and initiative. The poor test scores and failed simulations were not accidents, but deliberate attempts to keep humans from realizing how effective they could be in real combat situations. Taeho was so absorbed in reading the files that he did not notice someone approaching until a hand touched his shoulder. He spun around expecting to see a security officer, but instead found Minho standing behind him with a concerned expression. "You have been working on this terminal for 3 hours," Minho said quietly. "Da-un sent me to check on you because she was worried you might be in trouble." Taeho looked around and realized that most of the rescue operation had been completed while he was reading. The other team members were preparing to return to the Swift Justice, and only a few technicians remained aboard the research vessel to finish collecting equipment. "Minho, I need to show you something," Taeho said urgently. "But we have to be careful about who else sees this." He quickly showed his roommate the most important files, including the details about Project Understanding and the way humans had been manipulated and studied. Minho read through the information with growing shock and anger. "This means everything we have been taught is a lie," Minho said when he finished reading. "We are not inferior or limited. We have been deliberately held back to serve someone else's agenda. It gets worse," Taeho replied. "Look at this section about future operational plans. The hegemony expects the Karthak to launch a major offensive within the next year. When that happens, they plan to use human forces as expendable shock troops while keeping the real strategic assets in reserve." Minho stared at the screen in horror. "They are planning to sacrifice us. They want the Karthak to destroy as many humans as possible, so there will be fewer of us left to cause problems later." Before Taeho could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the research vessel. The emergency lighting activated, and an automated voice announced that all personnel should evacuate immediately. Through the nearest viewport, Taeho could see new contacts appearing on the edge of sensor range. More ships were approaching the Void Sector. Commander Kanthari's voice came over the communication system, ordering everyone to return to the Swift Justice immediately. As Taeho and Minho ran toward the airlock, they could hear the commander talking to his tactical officers about the incoming contacts. "Configuration suggests a Karthak exploration fleet," one officer reported. 12 vessels approaching at moderate speed. They do not appear to be in attack formation." "That makes no sense," Commander Kanthari replied. "The Karthak do not send exploration fleets, and they certainly do not approach slowly. Something is very wrong here." The tension on the bridge of the Swift Justice was so thick that Taeho could barely breathe as Commander Kanthari decided whether to allow communication with the Karthak fleet. Every officer and crew member was staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion to outright hostility. The alien cadets who had always treated him as inferior now looked at him like he might be some kind of secret agent or traitor. "Open a secure channel," Commander Kanthari finally ordered. "But maintain full defensive posture and be ready to jump to hyperspace if this is some kind of trap." Lieutenant Crystalsong 4 activated the communication system, and her crystalline body glowed as she established contact with the Karthak flagship. The main view screen changed from showing the alien fleet to displaying what appeared to be the interior of a Karthak command center. The aliens themselves were smaller than Taeho had expected, with gray-green skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to reflect intelligence rather than the savage mindlessness that hegemony propaganda had always described. The Karthak commander spoke in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am Research Leader Korvash of the Karthak Collective. We thank you for accepting our communication request. We wish to speak directly with the human Kim Taeho regarding matters of critical importance to both our species." Commander Kanthari stepped forward with his 6 arms spread in what might have been either a threatening or diplomatic gesture. "I am Commander Vos Kanthari of the Galactic Hegemony. Before any conversation takes place, you will explain how you obtained classified information about members of my crew." Research Leader Korvash tilted his head in what seemed like genuine confusion. "Commander, we have been monitoring hegemony communications for many cycles as part of our research into tactical deception patterns. Your species has been feeding us false and incomplete data about human combat behavior while simultaneously studying our responses to this information," the Karthak leader paused and looked directly at Taeho through the view screen. "However, we have recently discovered that individual humans possess capabilities that do not match the data we were given. The human Kim Taeho has been deliberately concealing his true abilities in your Academy records. We believe he has also discovered the truth about Project Understanding and the manipulation both our species have experienced." Commander Kanthari turned to stare at Taeho with his 4 yellow eyes blazing with anger. "Cadet Kim, you will explain immediately what this alien is talking about." Taeho felt his heart pounding as he realized he had no choice but to tell the truth. Everyone on the bridge was waiting for his answer, and there was no way to avoid explaining what he had discovered. He took a deep breath and tried to keep his voice steady as he spoke. "Commander, I found classified files on both the Academy systems and this ship that detailed something called Project Understanding," he said. "The hegemony has been systematically studying human combat behavior and sharing selected data with Karthak research facilities. The goal appears to be making the Karthak overconfident about their ability to counter human tactics." The bridge erupted in shocked voices as the non-human crew members tried to process what Taeho had just revealed. Commander Kanthari raised one of his 6 hands for silence, and his stone-like face showed a mixture of fury and what might have been fear. "Those files are classified at the highest levels," he said slowly. "How did a failed cadet gain access to information that even most officers do not know about?" "Because I am not really a failed cadet," Taeho replied, feeling a strange sense of relief at finally telling the truth. "I have been deliberately performing poorly on tests and simulations because I discovered that humans were being studied and I did not want to give you more data to use against us." Da-un stepped forward and stood next to Taeho. "He is not the only one, Commander. Several human cadets have been holding back their true abilities because we suspected something was wrong with the way we were being treated and tested." Minho and Wu Jin moved to stand with them along with 3 other human cadets who had been part of the rescue team. Commander Kanthari looked at them with growing alarm as he realized that his carefully controlled experiment had been compromised by the very subjects he had been studying. Research Leader Korvash watched this exchange with obvious interest before speaking again. "Commander Kanthari, your deception has harmed both our species. The Karthak Collective believed we were developing effective countermeasures against human unpredictability. Instead, we have been studying false data, while humans adapted to conceal their true capabilities from analysis." The Karthak leader turned his attention back to Taeho. "Human Kim Taeho, we propose a 3-way negotiation between representatives of our species, the true human military potential, and the hegemony command structure. We believe all 3 groups have been manipulated and that cooperation may be more beneficial than continued conflict." Commander Kanthari looked like he was about to refuse when Lieutenant Crystal Song 4 interrupted with an urgent report. "Commander, I am detecting additional ships approaching from multiple vectors. The signatures suggest both hegemony reinforcements and additional Karthak vessels. We may be surrounded within the hour." The tactical situation was becoming more complex by the minute as ships from both sides converged on the void sector. Taeho realized that whatever happened next would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humans and the rest of galactic civilization. "I propose we conduct the negotiation," he said, before Commander Kanthari could object. but not as representatives of our official command structures. Let us speak as individuals who have discovered the truth about how we have all been manipulated." Commander Canthari looked at him with suspicion. "You are a cadet, Tae-ho. You have no authority to negotiate on behalf of anyone. Neither do you, if your superiors have been lying to you about the real purpose of this mission," Tae-ho replied. "Research Leader Korvash is right. We have all been used as pawns in someone else's game. Maybe it is time we started thinking for ourselves." Da-un moved closer to Tae-ho and took his hand in a gesture of support that made his heart skip a beat. "Tae-ho is right, Commander. The files we found on the research vessel proved that this entire situation was orchestrated by Hegemony High Command. They wanted the Karthak to attack human forces so they could test their theories about combat effectiveness, while getting rid of potential troublemakers." Wu Jin stepped forward holding the portable data storage device he had been carrying. "I downloaded copies of all the research files before we evacuated. The evidence is undeniable. Humans have been deliberately trained to fail while their real capabilities were hidden from both enemies and allies." Minho nodded in agreement. "The AI. Technical specifications alone prove that human equipment has been sabotaged to perform below optimal levels. We could have been much more effective in combat situations if we had been given proper training and resources." Commander Canthari listened to these revelations with growing discomfort as he realized the implications of what the humans were saying. If they were telling the truth, then he had been an unwitting participant in a conspiracy that threatened the stability of the entire Galactic Alliance. Research Leader Korvash watched this exchange with obvious satisfaction before making another proposal. "We suggest a practical demonstration of interspecies cooperation. The approaching fleets from both sides will expect either combat or surrender. Instead, we propose a coordinated defensive formation that protects all three groups while we negotiate a permanent solution." Tae-ho felt a surge of excitement as he realized what the Karthak leader was suggesting. Instead of fighting or fleeing, they could work together to create a new kind of tactical approach that combined the strengths of all three species. It would require trust and cooperation, but it might also prove that the old patterns of conflict and domination were not inevitable. "Commander Canthari, what if we could demonstrate that humans are not the liability your superiors think we are?" he said. "What if we could show that cooperation between species produces better results than manipulation and control?" The commander stared at him for a long moment with his 4 eyes reflecting internal conflict. Finally, he made a decision that surprised everyone on the bridge. "Very well, Cadet Kim. You seem to understand this situation better than anyone else here, so I am placing you in charge of coordinating our response. But if this goes wrong, the responsibility will be entirely yours." Tae-ho felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak, but he also felt more alive and focused than he had in months of pretending to be something he was not. Around him, the other human cadets looked at him with expressions of hope and determination, while the alien crew members watched with curiosity and growing respect. Research Leader Korvash, are you willing to share tactical data with us in real time? He asked. "We are prepared to establish full communication links," the Karthak commander replied. "Our analysis indicates that combined human adaptability, Karthak research capabilities, and hegemony military resources could create unprecedented defensive effectiveness. Over the next hour, Tae-ho coordinated the most complex 3-way military operation in galactic history. The weeks following what galactic historians would later call the Void Sector Incident passed in a blur of debriefings, investigations, and political upheaval that reached the highest levels of both hegemony and Karthak leadership. Tae-ho found himself at the center of events that were reshaping interstellar relations in ways that no one could have predicted when he first discovered those classified files at the Academy. The evidence that Wu Jin had recovered from the research vessel combined with Research Leader Korvash's own documentation of Project Understanding created an undeniable case of systematic deception and manipulation by elements within both governments. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions to investigate the conspiracy, while news networks across dozens of star systems broadcast reports about the unprecedented cooperation between former enemies. Tae-ho and his fellow human cadets were initially held under protective custody, while investigators tried to understand how much they knew and what role they might have played in exposing the conspiracy. But as the scope of the deception became clear, it became obvious that the humans had been victims rather than participants in the scheme to use their species as unwitting test subjects. Commander Canthari faced his own investigation for his role in the project, though it became clear that he had been following orders from superiors who had not explained the true purpose of his assignments. The commander's initial hostility toward Tae-ho gradually transformed into something resembling respect as he realized how much courage it had taken for a cadet to stand up against the entire military hierarchy. You knew you were risking everything. When you accessed those classified files, Commander Canthari said during one of their final interviews, why did you continue investigating when you could have simply ignored what you had found? Because people were being hurt, Tae-ho replied. Not just humans, but Karthak and probably others too. Someone had to speak up even if it meant getting in trouble. The commander nodded with his 4 eyes, showing an emotion that might have been admiration. That kind of moral courage is exactly what the conspirators were trying to suppress in human training programs. They were afraid that humans who thought for themselves would be harder to control and manipulate. The investigation revealed that Project Understanding had been conceived by a secret coalition of hegemony officials and Karthak researchers who believed that interspecies conflict was inevitable and that the only way to prevent total galactic war was to ensure that humans could be controlled and directed by more stable civilizations. They had used fear and deception to manipulate both sides into a conflict designed to test their theories about human unpredictability while keeping humans themselves ignorant of their true potential. The plan had been breathtakingly arrogant and ultimately self-defeating. By treating humans as test subjects rather than partners, the conspirators had created exactly the kind of unpredictable response they had been trying to prevent. Humans had adapted to the deception by becoming even more unpredictable and creative in ways that the researchers had never anticipated. Dae-yun spent long hours working with the investigation teams to document exactly how human cadets had been systematically discouraged from developing their natural abilities. Her communication skills and analytical mind made her invaluable to the process of understanding how the conspiracy had affected individual students over several years of academy operations. The saddest part is how many talented humans never realize their own potential, she told Tae-ho during one of their rare private conversations. They internalized the message that they were inferior and never tried to prove otherwise. Min-ho and Woo-jin worked with technical teams to analyze the equipment and training programs that had been deliberately designed to handicap human performance. Their discoveries led to complete overhauls of academy curricula and the development of new training methods that emphasized human strengths rather than trying to force humans to fit alien models of military effectiveness. The political aftermath of the revelations was swift and dramatic. High-ranking officials in both the hegemony and Karthak governments were arrested or forced to resign. New treaties were negotiated that emphasized cooperation and mutual respect rather than dominance and submission. Most importantly, a new interspecies ethics council was established to prevent future manipulation of any galactic civilization. Research leader Korvash became an unexpected ally in these negotiations, representing Karthak factions that had opposed the conspiracy from the beginning but had been unable to act without evidence of hegemony involvement. His research collective worked closely with human scientists to develop new models of interspecies cooperation that were based on honest assessment of different species' capabilities rather than false assumptions and manipulated data. Humans possess a form of adaptive intelligence that we had misunderstood, he explained during one joint session. We thought unpredictability was a weakness, when in reality it represents a kind of creative problem-solving that could benefit all galactic civilizations if properly understood and respected. The formal recognition of what Tae-ho and his fellow cadets had accomplished came in the form of the most prestigious military honors that the Galactic Council could award. The Star of Xenophilic Cooperation was given to the entire team for their unprecedented success in building bridges between former enemy species. The Medal of Strategic Innovation recognized their development of new tactical approaches that combined the strengths of multiple civilizations, and the Galaxy Cross, the highest honor possible, was awarded specifically for preventing what could have been a devastating interstellar war. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy and attended by representatives from dozens of different species. Taeho stood on the platform wearing his dress uniform, while officials from the Galactic Council presented him with medals that represented achievements most military officers could only dream of accomplishing. Da-Eun Min-ho and Woo Jin received the same honors along with commendations for their specific contributions to the mission. But even as the medals were placed around his neck, Taeho could see Commander Kanthari in the audience with an expression of regret and frustration that told him the celebration was not going to last long. After the ceremony, Commander Kanthari approached him with a sealed document that he handed over without saying a word. The document was a classified directive from Hegemony Command stating that Cadet Kim Taeho, while officially recognized for his achievements, represented a continuing security risk due to his demonstrated ability to operate outside normal command structures and his tendency to question official authority. Therefore, despite earning the highest military honors possible, he was permanently prohibited from wearing any medals or decorations while serving in any official capacity with hegemony forces. They cannot court-martial you without admitting their own crimes, Commander Kanthari explained quietly. But they also cannot allow you to serve as an example of what happens when humans think for themselves. This is their compromise. You get to keep the honors, but you can never display them where other humans might be inspired by your example. Taeho. Read the document twice before folding it carefully and putting it in his pocket. The irony was perfect in its cruelty. He had earned the galaxy's highest recognition for military achievement, but was forbidden to acknowledge it because his success had been achieved through exactly the kind of independent thinking that the establishment wanted to discourage in other humans. What happens now? Da-Eun asked when he told her about the directive. Now we go back to the academy and pretend to be normal cadets again, Taeho replied. Except we are not the same people we were before, and everyone knows it, the return to academy. Life was surreal in ways that none of them had anticipated. Officially, nothing had changed. Taeho was still listed as a marginal student with poor test scores and limited potential. His medals were locked away in a classified storage facility where they could not inspire other cadets to question their own limitations. The curriculum continued to emphasize human weaknesses rather than strengths, despite all the evidence that had been gathered about the effectiveness of different approaches. But unofficially, everything was different. Other human cadets looked at Taeho and his friends with new understanding and respect. Word of what they had accomplished spread through informal networks despite official attempts to downplay their achievements. Most importantly, the alien cadets who had once dismissed humans as inferior now sought them out as partners and collaborators in training exercises. The change was most obvious in Da-Eun, who had been offered a posting to Earth to help establish a new human tactical innovation center that would develop training methods based on actual human capabilities rather than artificial limitations. The posting came with a promotion to lieutenant and the opportunity to work with the best military minds in human space. They want me to recommend other humans for the program, she told Taeho as they walked through the observation deck where they had first talked about their suspicions. I told them I knew exactly who should be my first choice for a partner. Taeho looked out at the stars and felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty about the future.